Hey guys. Hi Hero. So I like to listen to YouTube videos when I am trying to sleep sometimes, but sometimes with the music and things they cannot be the best for sleeping, and so I decided to make this video specifically for people who are trying to sleep and just some nice... I've tried ASMR before and I don't think I'm very good at it, but a lot of times instead of just listening to ASMR, which is a kind of audio that helps people get a certain relaxing sensation that helps them sleep sometimes instead of that I just listen to type of reading and talking and things that is in sort of tonality that is just sort of relaxing and helps me personally sleep. So I thought I would do one of those instead, in case any of you have trouble sleeping or are trying to rest or something and just want to have a video to listen to. So this, I'm showing my pop figure, and in this video I'm going to be talking about, going to try to make it kind of semi-long because it's for the purpose of helping people relax, and this way they won't have to keep switching videos, and maybe it's long enough that it could help someone fall asleep, and then they wouldn't have to put on another video after. So in this video I'm going to be talking about my 4 favorite Phantom characters, which are Loki, if it wasn't obvious already, the Doctor, 10th Doctor from Doctor Who, Spock from Star Trek, and Daniel Jackson, Dr. Daniel Jackson from Stargate SG-1. So, and I'm also holding these, my 2 pop figures from Firefly, and they are a gift from my parents, and so they're really cute. This one's Kaylee, and I love her little outfit. This one, I can't actually remember her name, right? Zoe, yes. She's got a real gun, which makes it pretty cute. So, with Loki, the reason I really appreciate him as a character is that first of all, he's acted by Tom Hiddleston, and Tom Hiddleston is a very good actor. I respect him a lot, and I also really respect how he thinks about art and how he thinks about characters and acting. So he brought a lot to the role of Loki with his just perspective on when you are playing a character. He talks about how when he plays a character, he doesn't judge that character, because then that makes you not able to play them, and so he doesn't judge anything that Loki's doing as good or bad. As Tom Hiddleston, he doesn't judge Loki as good or bad while he's playing him, because that would ruin his ability to act him. And I feel that same way when I'm writing, that when you're writing certain characters, you have to remove, especially if you're writing from their POV, basically, point of view, you have to remove your ability to, not your ability, but you have to remove any judgment you may have for that character while you're writing them, so that they can appear really, like, realistic and just really authentic. So, in my belief is that an authentic character is a better character. Now, with Tom Hiddleston's ability to do that, he brings to Loki a lot more authenticity than I think the previous just comic book character of Loki had. The comic book character of Loki was a lot more just, I mean, he had a lot of the same attributes, and I think they're pulling in like the newer Marvel comics, they're pulling in a lot of Tom Hiddleston's portrayal of Loki into the character. But before that, he was mostly just evil for the sake of evil. Did not a ton of obvious motivation, obviously mischief, but just not a lot of depth there. And Tom Hiddleston brought a lot of complexity and depth to Loki's character, which I think gives a lot of people something to latch onto, because they just sort of can now have so much to explore inside his character, because there's so many options, like what if he was in this situation, what would he do, and he connects to a certain part of them that, like, Tom Hiddleston believes that inside each person is the ability to be pretty much anybody, And most people, like he's talked about it one time as describing it like a keyboard. Like one person in life, like one person is like a keyboard, and most people just play one set of keys, for one set of chords for their entire life, and that is them, their personality, and how they live, and how they have continuity within themselves. But then that, when you're acting, you're playing different chords, and the more different chords that you play is like the more different personalities from yourself. So it's like he's finding within himself the ability to actually be Loki, and that then leaves us, I think, something to connect the audience, something to connect to, and we can see ourselves, that we have the ability to be Loki, that we have that in us as humans, to be evil, to be corrupt, to be embittered, and that gives us more care about what happens to Loki, because it's kind of like with Frodo in the Ring. Like, he cared a bunch about what happened to Gollum because he could see that he could be Gollum, that Gollum was the most corrupt by the ring that you could like possibly be, and he could see himself going towards that, and he could see so much of himself in Gollum that he couldn't judge Gollum too much. He had to believe there was hope for Gollum because he had to believe there was hope for himself. And I think sometimes as an audience we can want to believe that there's hope for Loki because we want to believe there's hope for us, and we see part of ourselves in him. So that makes him really cool. And anytime that he's in a new scenario, a new film, a new situation, kind of offers us like a new look at something about ourselves. Loki has been embittered by his family, and he has jealousy. That's a big issue that has given birth to his evil, and it comes up all the time. But not jealousy for Thor, and jealousy for his father's approval, which we all have a level of jealousy, even if we sort of just think of it as ambition. Like, we want such and such thing, we want to look such and such way, and so we can relate with that. And any story that deals with Loki's jealousy deals with our own, and what that leads to and where that goes. The fact that Loki's character is so not preachy, as in they don't set out and say, Loki is jealous right now, and this is how you can learn to not be jealous. They really don't. They leave so much of what is taught by Loki in question. They leave it sort of hanging. And what I believe is whenever you write characters and stories, and you sort of leave that thing of the questions unanswered, and you sort of leave the potential for what the character could be or do unanswered, you leave the audience something to chew on and mull on. And that sticks Loki in the heads of people because they're trying to figure out questions that are raised subconsciously in the films and how to figure it out. Another thing about Loki is he has found a way to empower himself. So he was totally wrecked and ruined by his greed and jealousy. Like, he's like, I'm not Thor, I can never be Thor, Thor's the winner, I don't think he should be the winner, like all these different things. And then, but instead of imploding and dying, although he kind of did that in the first one, he finds a way to rise above it. Really bad ways, obviously, because he has found some kind of empowerment in himself, where he goes on to he figures out some talent that he has, which in his case is his wit, and to try to trump Thor, and to try to outwit Thor, and to try to make his name in the world, and give himself value in the eyes of people. And even though he's completely evil and it's completely horrible the way that he's doing it, I think we find an appeal in the fact that he is finding a way to overcome his restraints. The fact that he is finding a way to overcome his restraints. And yet we see the destructive qualities of that, not only destructive to everyone around him, but destructive to himself. His character is not one that can be sustained. It will ultimately end in multiple levels of self-destruction. He said himself, and he understands himself, really, because he said one time that satisfaction is not in his nature. Because really the truth is, no matter how much power and control he gained, he would never be happy, because he did a self-destructive cause, and it will never satisfy. And yet he's still using that pursuit to fulfill himself, and yet in his intelligence realizes that will never make him happy. Yet I believe that, like, say for instance, a drug addiction, it does keep him happy enough to not die, basically. And so he latches onto that, and he thinks there's no other way for him to ever be satisfied than to prove his worth through his wit and through his mischief. Anyway, completely fascinating character. He's also very amusing. He offers a glimpse of the underdog as well. Since Thor is the character that is the blonde, he's the jock, he's the strong one, he's the firstborn, he's the one that gets everything, and the popular kid. Loki's the one that's messed up. He's sort of the emo, so to speak, the goth, so to speak, the punk, so to speak, the nerd, so to speak, the outcast who's not popular, people don't really trust, they don't really get, they kind of forget about. And so all of us that feel that all the underdog in us is drawn to him. I want him to have a happy ending, because we as underdogs want to have a happy ending, and you kind of root for him because you want the underdog to have worth. And and the fact that Loki's Tom Hiddleston was able to give this much relatability and connection to somebody so corrupt and evil is also really fascinating. To me personally, as a writer, I study that character to make each one of my characters more relatable and more in tune and more likable, even though you hate them. Like, I hate Loki a lot of the time. He does awful stuff to people that we care about, but then you still care about him. So that's very interesting what they were able to do. So plus, a fun thing about Loki is he's very funny, he's very witty, not just in being clever, but in making funny lines. He's kind of dry, he kind of has a nihilistic attitude, and he makes some kind of dry humor about all kinds of things that oftentimes are very true, and in even though they're kind of dark, and so he can be kind of funny. Just in general, he can find humor in a lot of things that I think also helps him to gain, to combat his darkness and his hopelessness, is finding humor in darker things. So, but it's a level of humor that we can connect with. It's not so dark that we can't connect with it at all. So that makes him funny, which also makes him likable. You like people that are funny. And yeah. Now, I guess moving on to the Doctor, the 10th Doctor. He's really relatable to me, because of it's sort of a level of darkness. I mean, he does have a level of darkness, but the 10th Doctor is all about coming from having destroyed all of Gallifrey, and basically he killed an entire race, an entire planet, which was his people. So he's coming from the guilt of having destroyed life, and he's kind of turned, he's always sort of been like this, but the 10th Doctor, he's coming from having destroyed life, and now he's helping. He's trying to turn his pain into positive energy, unlike Loki, into energy towards helping people. And he has just a lot of darkness sort of bottled up, and he also finds humor as a way to sort of combat that. Not really dark humor, more just light, surfacey, kind of giddy, happy humor. And it's like a way that he stayed sane is that he doesn't go the route of Loki where he's just like, oh, she's dead. Whatever, don't care at all. He doesn't go that route. He goes the other route where he's cares immensely about everybody, because it's almost like he's destroyed an entire race. That leans towards him thinking that he hasn't, like, that he must not care anything about life, it must not be worth anything. But he flips that around on his head and then cares, forces himself to care super hard about life, anyone's life, really. Even when he's so angry that he literally just hates and wants to murder somebody, or sometimes like evil alien, and does it, it's like he still feels their pain, and he, for the most part, turns that into just helping people and just caring about people, which is, you know, something that he's been able to maintain. And also his having a companion. He always goes and finds someone to go around the universe with him. It's sort of, I think, his way of staying sane, not being alone anymore, even though humans are not his race. He still has a companion, someone to be with him, and that's also something that you should have if you're struggling with depression and those kinds of things, like, be with people. And he does that, unlike Loki. Loki is alone, and Loki wants to be alone, and I think there's something in the Doctor that kind of wants to be alone, but I think he also knows he would either turn evil or self-destruct, and so he always goes out and he does stuff to help himself, and then to sort of help other people in that way. And also he's super funny and lighthearted, and he uses his pain to also help him be sympathetic towards other people's pain, unlike Loki, who just wants everyone to feel his pain. And he tries to help people that have gone through things like him, or that are going through things like him, or protect people from having to go through things like him. He does not have a nihilistic attitude. He, in fact, infuses meaning and right and wrong and justice into places where there is none. He goes into a place and says, this is wrong, this is right, this has meaning, this life has meaning. Any place where there is no meaning, he, like, infuses meaning into it and believes in it so much that the people around start to believe in it too. And so he's more of a person to emulate. He's more of a person that I want that. I want to be the person that can turn their negative energy into positive energy. It also makes me think of the Hulk, how he helped people instead of just wallowing in his own grief. Anyway, turning negative energy into positive energy, and infusing meaning into a meaningless mentality. So that's him. And there's always hope in his life, I guess. Then next with Spock, a little bit of a different character. He's also a fish out of water, though. I noticed a lot of these characters are fishes out of water. Daniel Jackson is the only non-alien also in this menagerie of characters. But Spock, you just gotta love, because I think the relatability of him comes from his goal to control. First of all, he's just interesting because he's different, but also his goal is to just control his emotions. And while hopefully none of us are that extreme about it, where we try to, like, have no emotions, definitely as a girl, I have a lot of emotions that I try to keep under rein and under control and under things like that at points, and you can't always. And the cool thing about him is also that he has Kirk and Bones around him to appreciate, first of all, to appreciate his just talent and his scientific mind and all that, but also to encourage and allow him to freely, when he does show his emotions, and when he does become unable to be logical and scientific because of his emotions, they are completely supportive of that, partially because they're humans and they like to see humanity in other people, and just because they're good friends. So also the sort of threesome there, we're kind of going from like, sorry, but we're kind of going from like Loki, who's completely alone, to the Doctor, who is usually him and a companion, to Spock, who has Kirk and Bones, and I always thought of that as the sort of a 3. In the new movies, they kind of changed that into Kirk, Spock, and Uhura, but they're kind of mixing it now, and I'm not sure exactly what the chemistry is going to look like in the future. But in the original series, which is my favorite, and where I love Spock from, it's Kirk, Spock, and Bones that are the group of 3. And so they have each other. They've been compared before to Kirk being to Bones being the heart, Kirk being Spock being the mind, and Kirk being the body, the bronze, the brain, and the feelings. And they all have each other for all of that. And even though they pick on each other ruthlessly, similar to the Avengers, they love each other down underneath it, and they're all going for a common cause, which is a pretty cool thing in the first place. And Spock, I actually like the fact sometimes that he's so serious, just because there's something appealing about that. I think there's just this child in him that like wants to be heard and understood as human, and his emotions, but at the same time his pride does not want him to be understood and seen as human. So kind of always rooting for him to be able to accept that about himself, and he kind of does as he gets older in the series, sort of learns to accept like yin and yang, the logic and the emotion, sort of. But near to the beginning of the series, he definitely did not like his emotions at all. So I get, and besides, he's just cool looking and nice. The last one is Daniel Jackson. Ooh, I love him so much. Daniel Jackson, I realized recently, I don't know why I didn't know this already, that he was an anthropologist. And that what an anthropologist is and does, which is a huge part of Daniel's character and why I love him, is that they go to cultures, and instead of judging that culture, they just see things as how the culture sees them. So it's like they go into the culture, and if a lot of times this would happen with Daniel and Jack, where Jack would be like the leader of the military leader of the group would be like, they're just gonna like give their daughters away to other people, like that's horrible. Like Jack would be judging the culture in that way. Daniel would be the person that would be like, no, but see, in their culture it means this. He's always the person to say, in their culture it means this. Who are we to judge? A little bit of a Captain Kirk line there, but who are we to judge? And because he's an anthropologist, so his job is to understand cultures and better communicate with cultures. But he did get better through the series, although I was kind of sad about it, but at not becoming a part of the culture. And he actually got more judgmental of cultures in general as the thing went on. I think he in order to stay sane and combat all of the evil that he had seen in the universe, he had to judge things as right and wrong more harshly. But near to the beginning, he was a lot more just, this is just their way. We don't say what's right and wrong, we say what's their way. And that way he was extremely empathetic towards people, because he wanted to understand what their way was, and it wasn't there to say it was right or wrong. He was just there to understand and help communicate. Of course, he was also a linguist, so he could literally help them communicate, speak that language. But him being an anthropologist, it was more than that. It was about what this culture thinks and does, and pretty much this would happen in a lot of episodes. They got out of this rut eventually, but it wasn't too bad of a rut. They would bring like an alien entity on the base, and Daniel Jackson, and they would try to like talk to her. A lot of times it would be a girl. They would try to talk to her, and she wouldn't communicate with them, or she would lash out, and people would be like, okay, she's a monster, blah blah blah. Most people on the base saying like, we need to destroy this person. Sometimes it was just not a girl, it was just a guy, or it was an alien monster animal thing. But Daniel would be like, okay, well, just before you do anything rash, let me talk to it, or let me try to communicate with it. And then he would be the one that would go, maybe spend a few days trying to figure them out, gain their trust, and eventually figure out what made them tick, and try to be there for them. But there was that one Frodo Gollum moment in one of the episodes where he did figure out what this girl wanted, this robot girl wanted, and who she was, and he got really attached to her, and then like was trying to, because the people on the base were telling him, we have to like, destroy her, or we have to do this thing, and he was like, no. And then they were like, okay, we'll just get her over here. And then they didn't really tell him what they were doing, and then he got her over there with his trust, and then they destroyed her. And she like looked at him like, how, like, you were the only person I could trust, how could you betray my trust? And he was really upset, obviously, at Jack, and the base. So I think a lot of things like that, where he just got kind of crushed by what happened, led him to get harder as the series went on. To get sort of, because he's super naive and like awesome at the beginning, super just naive and everything at the beginning of the series, but he does get hurt a lot of times emotionally throughout, and I think kind of hardens him, which is sad. But since he's not military and he's surrounded by military people that are exploring planets and things, they can't technically tell him what to do because he's just a civilian, but they kind of can tell him what to do because they have to, for him to be on their team. And he does go through some training and learn some fighting and stuff. So then he cuts his hair and gets more buff, which kind of made me sad. I'm sure a lot of other girls were happy about it, but I like his long hair and his nerdiness. But he's able to really empathize with people culturally. And even though he's socially awkward, which is funny, because he really, the reason for that, a big part of it is that he was a historical anthropologist. I don't exactly know what that's called, but he studied ancient cultures and wasn't as much in tune with the modern culture. As they go to other planets and things, those aliens were placed there by, or governed by, aliens who used to rule over Earth, as like the Norse gods or the Greek gods or Roman gods or whatever. And so their cultures a lot of times resemble ancient cultures. So they were humans taken from Earth to these other planets. So he's able to communicate through ancient language and also understanding cultures as ancient cultures. But since he's an alien anyway, sometimes even if the cultures are a little bit harder for him to understand, it's not like they look at him as weird, because they're like, well, you're an alien, of course you're weird. It's not that strange. Whereas on Earth, they expect him to be more in tune. Yeah. So another thing I really like about Daniel is I relate with him because he's socially awkward and he's a nerd. And he's an awesome nerd because he knows all this cool, awesome stuff, but, you know, he's nerdy and it makes him awkward, and I relate to that. So I'm sitting here doing this whole video talking about analyzing sci-fi and fantasy characters. And the fact is, to a lot of people, that might seem really nerdy. And I'm not going to deny it. It is kind of nerdy. But to me, it's actually just philosophy and logic and science, and not something lesser than, I guess. So those are my favorite characters. I wrote a fan fiction one time where Daniel Jackson meets Loki, because they have such different perspectives on life, and Daniel Jackson would be one of the few people that wouldn't give up on Loki, that would keep trying to, at least earlier Daniel Jackson, keep trying to understand who he was, where he came from, and not judge and relate with him. And Loki would be one of those people who wouldn't just kill Daniel immediately, but might figure out how to use him or something. So that relationship would be kind of interesting, and might even like the fact that Daniel liked him or was wanting to be his friend, and while not allowing himself to get super attached to Daniel, because he just doesn't let himself get attached to anyone, he still might kind of like him and sort of like having him around if he could go to other cultures and translate for Loki. And I think Loki likes innocence in a way, because that's the one thing he doesn't really see and he almost doesn't believe in. So I think he's actually kind of drawn to it. And like, if he could restart the world, I think he would like the universe and rule it. I think he would like restart it with innocence and like indoctrinate the people to think that, to like believe his mentality and his way of thinking. Unfortunately, that would never work, because with humans, no one's innocent, and if we were, we would very soon be corrupt. And the same goes for aliens, because in all good sci-fi stories, aliens are in some way a representation of some aspect of humanity. So that wouldn't really work. But I think innocence does fascinate Loki, and so that was a cool fanfic to write. I did one where Loki met the Doctor, and that was one interesting one, because the Doctor could relate to Loki's darkness, and again, Loki with his sort of... Loki's not hardened, as in, Loki, I don't believe... Loki's sadistic, okay? So he sometimes enjoys causing people pain, but not in the way that some villains are sadistic. Loki is not hardened and doesn't care if people get hurt. I do think Loki is extremely empathetic and sensitive, and he can actually really, really feel people's pain. But because he is so pained inside, he likes to hurt other people to have them feel what he is feeling, or balance out his own pain, but not just because he can't feel it. Like, I really, really think he can feel other people's pain, and that kind of makes him creepier in a way, because he's sad for people that get hurt. Even if he's like nihilistic and like there's no meaning to life, he still thinks there's emotions. So it's like, for instance, if I always sort of visioned this, I didn't ever write this fanfic, but I envisioned if Loki ever killed Odin, I think he would basically cry, and maybe be crying while he was doing it, because Odin means the world to Loki, even though he hates him, because he wants his approval, and his strong, over-the-top emotional connection to Odin, and like just the idea that he could never be enough for Odin. He almost tried to kill himself in the first film. So if he ever killed Odin, I do think he's evil enough and twisted enough to do it, but I think he would cry, because he knows it's all wrong, and he didn't want that to happen at first. He never would have done it when he was younger, and his emotions still don't want him to, but his fear and his bitterness do. So I think he has too much of a connection to Thor to actually kill Thor, unless he like really needed to. Like, I really think he would do anything that he could to not kill Thor, because I think he really, really cares about Thor. Don't think he knows why, but it's almost like with the Master and the Doctor. Like, the Doctor in Doctor Who has... there's the Master, who's the only living survivor of Gallifrey, and the Master and the Doctor have the strange attraction to each other. Not attraction romantically, but they're drawn to each other, kind of like Thor and Loki. And the Master, who's also a really good villain, he seems to want the Doctor... not the Doctor's approval. Like, Loki doesn't want Thor's approval, for instance, and the Master doesn't seem to want the Doctor's approval, but he does seem to want respect and worth, and he kind of wants the Doctor to see what he's doing, to give him worth. Like, oh, look how much I can rule, look how much I can destroy things. It's like a game. Him and the Doctor facing off. It's like kind of like with Megamind. It's like with Megamind and Metro Man. It's like a game, and he wants to prove himself by beating the Doctor. And if the Doctor was dead, I think he'd have a lot less fun. He would say he wouldn't mind killing him, and like he might kill him at some point because he's insane, but I feel like if at all possible, he wouldn't. He wants him around to witness him winning the game, and I feel like the same thing with Loki and Thor. He needs Thor to beat Thor, and without Thor, there is no purpose to his destruction of Thor's plans, because Thor's not around. So that's that, I guess. Yeah, I did one where the Doctor and Loki met, and the Doctor was trying to convince Loki that he shouldn't end his life. Like, even though Loki probably wasn't going to do it, he was talking about it. And the Doctor was like, no, and it convincing him why there was hope and everything. And I always wanted to do a fanfic where Loki looks like the Doctor, like makes himself, uses his illusions and magic to make himself look like the Doctor, and then goes around in the TARDIS, because that would be crazy. And he would be kind of like the Master, I feel like, where he would keep the Doctor with him and sort of like to beat him and maybe like make him help him and stuff like that. And I think he would put the companion back in her home or something, because he wouldn't have any use for her, because she wouldn't be up to his level of intelligence, because she was a human, and he has a very low opinion of humans. But I think he would respect Time Lords, and that would be an interesting fanfic, although I don't know if I'm ever going to write it. You can feel free to write it if you want. Well, I hope that this video helped you to rest and sleep and made you a little happier, and helped you remember that whether you're nerdy or anything like that, that your thoughts matter and your feelings matter, and don't let anyone tell you differently. And aren't pop figures cute? This was not sponsored by Funko Pops. But Funko Pops, if you're out there and you want to sponsor me, please feel free. Send me all the pop figures you want. I will review them. And I will give them a positive review, because I love pop figures. Not that you need my help. You're obviously doing very well as a business. Just in case. I'd love to be saying right now, sponsored by Funko Pop. I'd love to be saying that right now. But they're not sponsored by... Yeah, so... Funko Pop, if you're watching, sponsor me. Yeah, so... Hey, we are epic heroes. We are epic heroes, each and every one of us, especially you. And I hope you have a lovely day, the rest of your day. God bless you. Bye.